This is part 2 of my conversation with Georjie Adams of Building Bluebell. If you haven't heard part 1, then I would strongly recommend you start there, as this is just a continuation of that conversation. How do you see your use of Bluebell? I mean, is it going to be something that you tour the world in? Is it sort of going to be quite static until you need to move? Or, how have you thought about that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I was really toying with the idea of doing like what you're doing, Jeffrey, on a trailer and doing a tiny house. And I ended up just swaying for doing something like this because of a bit of the flexibility it gives me, being that kind of light-footed traveler-y type. And so I never thought that this was going to be a road trip mobile, that I'd be scooting around all the time. It's still fairly heavy, and I am trying to be conscious-minded of my diesel consumption, of course. So driving it around all the time would be neither cost friendly or environmentally friendly. So for example, at the moment I have a really good bicycle, and that's like how I travel most places, and it stays in its spot. But then when I do a trip, that's part of that, so it will take me on a trip. And then ideally my idea is it's a lot of ideas. We will go overseas, I would love to think. The little dream is to be able to take this project that I'm dreaming of and go and find women doing projects and go on the road and meet people doing it. And so kind of combine it as not just a leisure activity, but something that also combines that purpose of that project. And maybe stopping and basing for quite a while. I'm definitely not like a traveler where you go somewhere and you spend a short amount of time. I like to really embed. I'm also considering, it's a massive privilege to be able to travel, and it has to be appropriate, and it has to be, if I am to base somewhere, it has to be appropriate for the locals. So I think there's a lot of thinking that has to go into moving Bluebell around. But yes, I would like to think that we do some traveling. Originally, when I was living overseas, I really kind of found it hard I did a lot of time in sustainable communities and living off grid, and I found it really hard to ever imagine myself doing that in England, and felt a large disconnection. But since I've actually been here building my home here and rooting a bit, I also feel this massive element of resistance. It's so hard. It's so hard for it, the actual environment in England to live sustainably off-grid and to live in alternative lifestyles, co-communities. It's really difficult, as we know, with planning and just the entire attitude. And originally that put me off, but then when I considered how important it would be to kind of fight that through and stick it out here, and the more that I've rooted back here again, I feel pretty passionate about trying to embed more visions of alternative living in England. And if I can be just a small speck of that would be really great. So I would like to think that I kind of I put in a bit of a resistance and be part of the crew here trying to push this lifestyle forward, rather than taking what could be a slightly easier option, and also a privileged option, right? To be able to just go and live elsewhere. Of course, Brexit would have put a spanner in the works anyway. But I think that's a question I have actually been thinking about a lot recently. But I think at the end of it all, I can't say yes or no to anything. I will see where life takes me. I do plan to travel around with Bluebell to find some cool, badass women.
Oh my goodness. It's going to be like a beacon of you're just going to have these incredible women like running at you going like, yes, let's chat about building.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like paradise, Jeffrey, I must say.
I do know what you mean about the like fighting the home fight, though. When I lived in the States, I thought, for a long time, I thought, I'm never going home. Like, why would I go home? I'm having such a nice time here. And then, like, almost overnight, I had this moment of, oh, I need to go home and make my home, the place where I'm from, better. I need to be part of, the sort of sustainable building team back there. And it felt really important. And I didn't know where it came from. And I was quite surprised when it poked its head up.
Yeah, interesting. I like that. Yeah. And it is important. I think it's so important. I think that, and this, I think, creating an environment and a discussion around sustainable and natural building in England, it has a very similar vibe to what I really want to do with women building. I think there needs to be more imagery, there needs to be more representation, and it needs to become more normal that it's not such an outrageous thought to be considering working with natural materials. And and so I think it's super important to bring that conversation home and to kind of keep it here regardless of the resistance that you might face against it. If you're staying and you're applying pressure, even that pressure could just be by existing and doing what you're doing and other people seeing, that all has domino effects that are probably greater than we may even be able to calculate. So I think it is, I definitely have felt that need, especially as we are looking things are looking a little bit disconcerting with the right to roam and the rights being stripped from a traveling community by the current what's happening with Kill the Bill and all of those very tricky and uncomfortable things that potentially could be passed by law. And so that I think when these things are still happening and there's still a desire to shut down a way of life and also to shut down an entire group of people, it's pretty scary. So I think that there is definitely still a fight to be had here. And I'd like to think that I could attempt to be a part of it, whether that's minor or major, who knows. But if I can put a little finger in there somewhere, that would be pretty cool.
Nice. Oh, that's ace. Just as an aside, if I can in any way point you at some of the women builders I know, then please do let me know if I could be helpful.
Yes, please. I think what I'm doing is I'm currently in the car park of my workplace, which I'm going to finish my contract in a month's time, and that when that finishes, I'm going to absolutely throw myself into learning and starting this project and kind of networking and going and visiting people and filming some projects. So I will be incessantly annoying to everyone in about a month's time. I'm going to become very annoying. For the moment, I'm keeping it a little bit just on the kind of very small building blocks, but then I'm just going to do what I do and launch into it. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, I can't wait to see what comes out of it. Because that's something we haven't talked about. Is your day job, besides building Bluebell, is
my day job is I am a filmmaker of video. I'm a video producer. So I actually work at quite a cool college in Westdean, which is the area of the South Downs, the village I live by in the South Downs. And it's like a conservation and art college. So I've actually been able to ferret some really cool materials and pick on some good brains here, because there are some really fabulous. I did like a day's blacksmithing course, which I made all of my coat hooks and my fire pokey stick, and I did a wood carving course because that was one of the really good benefits of staff, that if they're not fully booked, you can do them for free. It's a pretty cool place, and I really enjoy my job. Has been pretty cool because I've been filming sort of all of the stuff that goes on here, some creative courses, but it's lovely, but it's and actually it's been the nicest kind of job I've had for a while. I've definitely struggled in the past with work and finding enough and not getting really stressed out in other jobs. So this one's been doing it for a year, but I would like to take my my skills and my love for filming and storytelling and move that into a space and an area which I'm actually really passionate about, which is not commercial. It's not, it's not for profit. It would be for documentary and for the purpose of sharing important stories. So that's where I hope to take those skills next.
Yeah. So you don't fit into the category of kind of most of the people I tend to work with, where, started doing a job that they were sort of pushed towards, computer based usually, and then went, I've got to do something physical, and then have sort of jumped ship. The video stuff is still very much, what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. It's been a relationship working with a camera. It's something that I really struggled when I was a teenager with my mental health and was very unhappy. And then I found cameras, and that was the one thing that enabled me to escape and find a new world, and a world that I could see as optimistic and beautiful, and I could watch it slowly and in my own space. So that became a very important part of my life. And then I kind of moved it into, thinking I want to keep doing this as in my life. But that, finding some kind of balance between that. I really didn't want to go into commercial filmmaking. I wanted to go into documentary, but of course, finding the kind of balance of having enough work. And that's why living in something like Bluebell means that I don't need to worry about always having work, because I don't have this jet load of bills to pay each month. It takes the pressure off. And I have found that in the past, when I've been doing it, when I've been renting and I've been doing it as my full-time job, I have been so close to just putting the camera away and being like, I will never touch you again. I have fallen out of love with you. But at the moment, I actually live in a little hut. I'm partially living in Bluebell. I move out when I need to I'm currently now in the stage where I get out when I need to do something in it. And then I'm coming straight back in, especially now the log burner is in. But I have lived in a tiny dwelling in a shepherd hut basically for the last 4 years. And so I've been able to kind of create this good balance with working with cameras, where I don't do it too much, that it becomes my only thing, which I think a lot of us are forced to do in life, where we're working all the time, whether that's doing something we love or not. For a lot of people it's not, and then we have this very limited amount of time outside of that to do the thing that we love, and that there's so many things I can't even begin to choose which one to start with, and so I definitely don't see filmmaking as being this massive thing in my life, but it's definitely something that I want to keep and cherish. And so I find the relationship with filming and working with my camera and with building actually really, really kind of work. I think there's the same attention to detail, there's the same patience and the same stubbornness, with your camera. If there's a shot you're seeing in your head, or there's a vision you want to create, sometimes I'm sweating like a maniac, kind of with not stress sweat, but just with that intent, trying to get this particular shot. And I think that really applies into that kind of headset with building, where there's something you want to create, you see a vision in your head, and you will go at lengths to make that happen. And so the two things are actually, I find, intertwined quite well. And so hopefully I can combine them and be building and doing building projects, and then also filming people who are doing that kind of stuff. So it's turned out, fingers crossed, that it will stay enveloped in this kind of symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh goodness! Right, I'm going to hit you with a few last questions. Can we talk budget?
Oh, Bluebell.
Yes.
Yes.
Did you have something set out at the beginning?
Yeah, I wanted to not go over £10,000.
Okay, how are you doing?
Yeah, I am. I think I need to do I've got a little air table. I need to add up all my recent costs. Oh gosh, the flu.
I know.
The flu pipe system.
I've just ordered mine. Goodness
literally
me.
I was I had no idea that it was going to cost me so many hundreds of pounds to get some pipe. But it did. And so that is that there are little sneaky costs that totally threw me out, actually. But I think the last time that I actually checked, I was just over 9,000. So by the time that I've done, I may go slightly over that. By the time that I've done my if I think I have a slight feeling I'm going to need a special water tank made to fit my weird underbelly. That's a funny sentence, isn't it? But I don't hear that one every day. And I think that might be quite expensive unless I can kind of figure out a way to make that myself. That may end up taking me just over 10,000. But to be fair, when I first set the budget, I thought I might be doing something very similar to a Luton. So this has transpired. I mean, of course, that's my cost budget. If I was taking my labor hours, it would be a lot more. But I think I'm going to fit in and around somewhere around the £10,000 mark. That's including the cab.
I mean, that's fantastic. That's unbelievable. In fact, and is sort of without trying to sound too much like Kevin McLeod. It's a testament to your tenacity, I guess, is probably the word.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think also being so lucky to find so many materials that kind of, one thing, if I could sort of say to anyone who might be thinking about doing something like this and they want to find materials and they want to keep the cost down, is just talk to everyone about what you're doing. Even as an introvert and someone who can be slightly socially awkward at times, I would still kind of be like, right, just keep talking about what you're doing. And you'll just end up getting a message from someone who was like, I remembered that you were looking for this thing and I've seen this guy who's selling this stuff. And so that worked amazingly for me. So and also you'd be amazed where you can find materials. I mean, literally just going around walking in the countryside around old barnyards, I found these incredible old pieces of oak that were used for so tractors or cars even don't slip on the mud. So my whole steps that go, I have this lovely little oak step system that goes up to the bed, and that's all made from planks of oak that were used to stop cars skidding in the mud. And you're just amazed where you can find things, skips, and quite often you just see stuff where people are doing home renovations. All of my whole floor and a lot of my like my chairs and my back wall are all made out of Georgian floorboards. There's pretty much, I'm just looking around and everything here, pretty much everything I can see by the eye is waste material. And so that does keep, of course, your labor hours go up so much more, but it keeps the cost, the actual cost, because that's the thing. I had time to give. I didn't have money. I didn't have cash to put into the project, but I had time. And that's really what made this possible.
Yeah. Fantastic. And how much time, I think you sort of alluded to it earlier, but how many years now?
Yeah, I said 3, but it's actually been 3.5 now.
Ooh.
So by the time I'm properly finished, I mean, I'm probably always going to be tinkering on. I want to build 2 more stained glass windows for it. So there's still all these sort of little things I want to do. But in terms of finishing it where I'm like, right, I am now living in it and that's it. I'm not evacuating it to be for more building to be done. I think ideally, if I can do it, then I'd like to be able to be finished this winter. So it will probably be about 4 years, this project. 4 years by the time I'm finished.
Nice. So the one time when I've worked on a house that's been on Grand Designs, I'm obviously clearly it's in my head now. I did an earth floor for a chap called Ed and Rowena, who have spent the last 13 years building their house. And there is such strong parallels between your method and his. It's like, I am going to hand make absolutely everything because it'll be beautiful. And, and I've got this bit of something that I found over here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all the little things, like making most of the stuff that I've done, which has taken loads of time, wasn't necessary. So making all of the slicing down those old beams in order to put over the top of that all in all, that's taken me weeks and weeks to do all that, and probably more actually. I mean, I should say it's been 3.5 years on and off. It's not been full time. It's been where I work. Obviously, it's been part time. But it's been. I tell you what, it's definitely at least been 3.5 years of just like my entire headspace. And I must say, I'm ready for something. I got a bit scared about it finishing, and there's still a part of me which is a bit scared about it finishing, because then I'm like, who am I? I don't know who I am anymore. When I have free time again, what do I do? And then knowing me, I have been like, I will do this project straight away. There will be no gap. But no, I mean, I do think it's really important to take time for reflection. And fortunately for me, because I live in the countryside, what a blessing, huh? I'm able to kind of escape and get into the woods and do a lot of downtime. So fortunately, that's actually part of my lifestyle. I don't really need to take time away to do it. It just kind of, and I have a dog, so every day, a very active one, so every day, I'm out and about, so that kind of helps with that downtime. But I do get scared about what will happen when it finishes, because I've just put so much of myself into it. So then when I'm finished, I'm like, am I finished? Is that me done? So I kind of, but at the same time, I've had a bit of an interesting few months actually, where I got really overwhelmed a bit by Bluebell actually. And because I'm naturally quite an observer and quite fairly introverted, although I like to participate. I am an observer, and Bluebell forces me to be a performer in many scenarios, and it can be sometimes uncomfortable, because actually I did just as a pure, the pure concept of Bluebell was to be a sanctuary. It was to be a shelter. It wasn't to be a performance. It wasn't to be a theatre. And it wasn't to kind of go around shouting out about it. But sometimes it just ends up being what I find myself doing. And I've had to have an interesting question with myself recently actually about how that's having a bit of an effect on me, and it's actually making my social anxiety worse, because I'm already going into situations fearing that I'm going to have to start being a performer in that moment. And so I've had a bit of an assessment of how I take this project and then just make it normal, how it just becomes life, and it's not this thing, it just is my home. And there's undoubtedly always going to be questions of people who are interested, and that's really exciting, and I liked being able to talk about it. I think it was more a question of I need to find a way of releasing a bit and letting it go, and again, harking back to what I said before, just taking it a little bit less seriously, it's just a cabin, isn't it? It's like, it's all good. It's just a van house. And actually I can take a step back from it, and I don't have to feel the pressure. It's a really interesting question that I haven't entirely fully figured out yet, but I definitely think that I'm ready to move on to some new things now. It's always going to be there with me because it's my home, but I'm ready to kind of release it. If that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, I think so. Like the question I had under like my last question was what next, underlined twice, because I felt like you were the sort of person that was going to have some interesting thoughts on that. And I also just wanted to say I'm very sorry if I'm making you perform by recording this chat.
No, absolutely not. No, this is such a perfect performance. I'm by myself, and I've got my dog to my right. And no, not at all. Seriously, this is I enjoy. I still enjoy participating and talking to people. I think it's just like when you're at Sainsbury's.
Yeah, you're just trying to do your ordinary life. You're not you're not on stage.
Yeah, it just, I think when you build anything that speaks for itself, or anything that is kind of aesthetic and a bit wonky, in some places that I've been to, some cultures, some communities, some environments, you might not even just be kind of like something you might expect, especially in New Zealand. But here, of course, it's kind of quite a constricted space, isn't it? There's a lot that just falls into what things should be, or what stuff should look like. Cars are grey and white and black, and they're not really much else. And houses are bricks and mortar. And
corners,
so when
straight lines.
Yeah, exactly. And so when you do things a bit different, it sparks conversation, and that is brilliant. And I'm very excited and thankful for that. But yeah, I think I just had to figure out that question of when do I realize that I am doing a bit of a performance, and how do I just kind of go back to me and ground. And I actually think that I will find that by just spending some time in Bluebell. I haven't just really properly lived in it because I'm still building it. So it still is this project. My house is still a project. And I think once it just becomes my house and nothing more, I think that will become a lot easier to navigate. And I'm sure as you must feel as well. Of course, that's why you do these amazing podcasts, is because talking about creative projects, creative things with others who are also interested is one of my absolute soul foods, especially when you're in an environment. I live in a kind of in an area that's very conventional, very conservative, very kind of traditional, and it can be very hard to find your people. Really, I really struggled with that for quite a while, feeling quite alone. And so being able to really actually talk to others and connect is wonderful. And I'm very, very thankful that Bluebell is giving me this opportunity. What a gift.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. I saw that you did a show recently following on from the performance thing, and I saw the queue of people wanting to have a poke inside. How was that?
So I turned up. It was just a really small local thing, but it was busier than I thought it was going to be. So I turned up, and I've never opened Bluebell up to the public before or anything like that. And I just thought, people might be interested to have a little look. So I parked up, and I put some steps, and I put a little sign in felt tip just saying come in, and then I kind of walked away from it and spent the entire day avoiding it like a rash because to my surprise, there was actually a queue that just sort of stayed the whole day. And I think I wasn't quite ready really just to kind of stand there and talk about it in such a constant way. I really like these one-on-one conversations, or smaller, more intimate conversations where you can really engage with people and give them time and answer questions properly. Whereas in that circumstance, I think it would have been a tad rushed. So actually, I think it was much nicer to let people make their own assumptions and make whatever people might not like it. And that's absolutely fine. I really enjoy it when people challenge me about it and people say there are things that they don't like about it. And sometimes people say it really politely and it really constructively, and other times people are just like, I don't like that. Why have you done that? Yeah. I once got a tut. That was one of the best moments of Bluebell's history, was when we got a tut. Oh, that was so good. But yeah, I do really enjoy those conversations, but I didn't feel like I could quite do it in that environment. So I just left it and returned later. And it was really nice. And something that I love is that kids really, it's definitely when I built this, one of the biggest elements of building this was connecting with my inner child. And I think that surely the joy of building is so much connected with that. It's you're making, all of us, girl, boy, when we're kids, we're making in some way or another. We're being curious with our environment. We are exploring materials. And so I feel very much connected to my inner child when I'm building. And I think especially because I do put an effort to listen to it and not kind of ignore it and be like, oh, well, that's not how you do things, or that's not how something's meant to look. But actually I do try to put in quite a bit of an effort with that and sort of go, oh yeah, well, why not? and that has ended up making things in some respect look quite quite childlike. And I think some of those inspirations, maybe from folklore and fairy tales from when I was younger, may have then connected into the visions and the aesthetic of the space. So quite often children really relate to Bluebell and want to spend time in it. And especially I have this like old witchy doorbell, which is an old cowbell on the outside, and I've mainly built that for kids so they can ring it, and that always brings it's like an immediate smile bringer for kids, which is really, really nice. And if anything, if that's all that I ever end up doing with Bluebell, just kind of like showing other people about that, and or connecting with other children as well. I don't have many child friends in my life. And so I find it's really nice. It's a really nice thing to be able to connect with kids in that way. The best time ever was when I was building the roof, and this boy came up to the yard and he was like, "It's a spaceship." And and then I convinced him for the rest of the day that I was actually an astronaut and I was building this spaceship, and that was like one of the best days of my whole life. I was an astronaut for the day.
There's a couple of elements in my build that I have designed. I'm not telling anyone about them yet, but I've designed them just for my nieces so that they think I'm the best uncle.
Amazing.
That's Kudos. The whole reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And you probably will also secretly enjoy those things a lot just for you too.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm not quite sure.
I definitely will. Okay, well, what do you think? What's your favorite bit
about Bluebell?
Yeah.
Ooh. I mean, it's hard not to say the dome bedroom. Because that was also another 6-month project, just cladding the inside of that. So and that was really awkward because working up there is like a very tight, I mean, when you're living in it and sleeping in it, it's fine. I've got loads of headroom. I can sit up fully with lots of extra space, but actually working in it was quite a tough job. And but yeah, I remember when I went to clad it, and I had a lot of I had quite a lot of people telling me just to do it with fabric, because basically the shape is just curving all over the place. I don't have the skills or the equipment to do steam bending, and even if I did, I think it would have taken probably longer than the way I did it, because there are so many different shapes. Each piece of wood is basically a different shape. It's just continuously rolling. And so I did it with this cedar that I got for free, and I cut it all down into little strips, and every single piece of, apart from in a few sections, every single piece of wood has an individual angle taken off it to create a curving flow. So
I can totally believe that. And that you would have the thought to do that, and not just like destroy everything and go away.
Yeah, it was one of those things that I think was the same with the roof. Once I put one piece in, up until the very moment of deciding that was what I was going to do, I could have very easily been like, hell's no, that's way too much work. But once I put just like the first bit in, I was like, right, that's it, that's what we're doing. And it was in the winter as well, so I did it at night. It was often after work or at night, and so I just had this kind of this power light, one of the ones you get on building sites, quite a basic little one, and it would and I'd be up there and it would be warm because the heat of the light would then heat the dome, and it was so cold after just what Bluebell at that time, and working outside in it, and I had no source really of proper heating, and it was cold. And so I would get all in this little dome, and I'd get all cozy, and I would be dreaming constantly about what it would be like to sleep in that dome. And I put in a skylight as well, which was a major biatch, because it's sort of putting that in putting a straight skylight in a curved roof was a really weird piece of construction I had to make. But I had all these, I was up there in the winter in the dark, often, at times going through bouts of depression, or, not feeling particularly well, or feeling pretty lonely in the countryside in my little hut. And I'd just be like up in this dome and just visualizing, what the the kind of, what the results will be and what will happen if I keep going, if I just keep going. And I got this little mantra in my head, and it's not poetic, it's not pretty, but I would tell myself, I'd quite often stop and get in like deep waves of thought about whether I was doing the right thing, because it was so much work, and then I would stop working, and I could have put in 2 more boards in all the time that I was sitting there assessing. And this happened in a lot of other elements of the build. And I just told myself, stop thinking and do. That was, that was like my mantra. I'd like get into a silly headspace and I just tell myself, stop thinking and do. So I would just pick up the tool and keep going. And it was this, I got into this real cycle up there of visualizing and then falling into uncertainty and then mantra. And it was like this kind of crazy loop. And then when I was finished with it, and I really remember just like taking a step back. Obviously, as I was building it, I was assessing that it was looking right and that I was liking the way it looked. But I really took a step back at the end after and broke that loop, that cycle, and looked up into the dome and was like, that is the place that I'm going to wake up each morning, and I'm going to wake up by a lake or by a forest or with a community of friends. And this little dome is going to be my safe pod. And so I think what happens is the light comes in through the skylight and it really illuminates the space. And then it has a window at the front and a window at the side. And it all lights up like orange and yellow because of the cedar. And it smells incredible because of the cedar as well. And it's kind of just like this light orb space. So I think probably I have to say the dome.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I guess sort of the flip side of that is there a bit where your least favorite bit, or how do you say that in a positive manner? Like I don't know. Maybe it's not.
No, I'm with you, Jeffrey. Yeah, like kind of like the bit that maybe the bit that's not quite.
If you were doing it again, you might have done differently, or.
Yeah. I have to say, I don't know. I think it is all pretty much exactly how I have wanted it to go. There were moments when I almost skimped on something and I knew I would regret, and I like caught myself at the last moment. And like with the solar panel frame, for example, that was one. Also with the dome, I almost didn't do that wood cladding. So many examples of that where I almost didn't do something because it would be hard. And I caught myself on each of those moments, and thankfully I didn't succumb to the kind of the fear of the amount of work. And of course, often when you're fearing the amount of work, you're not actually fearing the amount of work or like the effort. You're fearing those challenges that are going to come with that, and how that's going to make you feeling incapable and angry and like annoyed. And I'm definitely someone who, you'll hear from across the yard just like random curse words being like blown into the air. I'm definitely not like a cutesy builder. I definitely get like moments of rage. But yeah, I think that I caught myself on all of those moments where I almost did the easy thing. And so as a result, even though it's taken a lot longer because of all those decisions, and it's been probably a lot harder, I've now got a space where I don't think there's anything, pretty sure there's nothing that I would change or I would have done differently.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Hey there, I'm Mick from the Mick and Pat Show.
That's right, and I'm Pat.
Looking for a podcast that's like catching up with old friends? Well, you're in luck.
We're here to bring you weekly doses of lifestyle commentary, discuss culture and politics, and top it off with the occasional beer and film reviews.
But it's not just about us, we're a community. Our listeners are our kin, and we let you all have a say in what we discuss.
So saddle up and join the conversation at the Mick and Pat Show. You can check out our website or find us wherever you get your podcasts.
Brilliant. I mean, I sort of suspected that might be the answer. I mean, from that, the solar panel frame video that I watched alone, it was like, if you saw something that you weren't happy with, I'm pretty sure you were gonna do something about it. Yeah.
And you're looking at it all the time, aren't you? So it's something, I think a home space is something that and there are definitely exceptions. I'm looking at the back wall there, which is all these Georgian floorboards, and the line sometimes I do things really meticulously, and other times I'm just like so lazy, and the line of screws just goes like literally like a wave. I haven't done them in a straight line. They are all over the place. And it's little things like that. I'm like, why? It would have taken me all but like a second to just draw a line across. So I'm a bit odd like that.
Mm-hmm.
There are some things where I'm just extensively can't be asked. and then kind of on a grander scale, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So it's kind of, there are quite a few elements like that in here, but maybe that's a good thing, just to remind myself again not to take it too seriously.
Yes.
Just to chill out a bit in that respect.
Yeah. Well, I can't remember if I've said this before on the podcast, but the old Viking shipbuilders, they would build a ship and then they would deliberately do one thing wrong because only the gods could be perfect. So
Nice.
Maybe that's your screw line. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, for sure. And there's quite a lot of those screw lines around. So there's enough. I'm noticing all of them now. Jeffrey, what have you done? What have you done?
I'm so sorry.
But yeah, I think it's quite important to have those, to have those moments. And I'm also not someone, if something can't be seen, it looks like, if you were to look behind all like the kind of the internals, and there's a lot which is ultra bodged. In fact, I actually do think most of Bluebell is just one big bodge. Definitely something that I want to really put across to people if they were to look at Bluebell and think it's been done all perfectionly or whatever, is that it was all just like step by step. So, and none of those individual steps actually required much skill or ability or perfectionism. For example, even in the dome, each piece of wood just had to have a line cut through it. It's just that simple. It just had to have a saw cut, and then I would just screw it in, and I would put one screw on either side of the board, and then the next bit I would screw each step of every part of Bluebell is relatively unskilled and very basic. Those core fundamentals of construction often are just very basic, but you just have to be methodical. You just have to make sure that when you make that measurement, you measure it twice, and then when you do that cut, that you put effort into keeping it straight. So it's not that anything actually requires you to be that particular kind of perfectionist person, or you need to be really skillful. I am still bodging everything that I do. It's just one big bluff. Like honestly, most of the things I do, it's just that definitely has that element of bodgeness where I'm like, right, how do I do this? Okay, I'll just hit that like that bit. Oh, that worked. All right. or get a chisel. I'm like, okay. I literally, even to this day, I look at a chisel. I'm like, which end is the one that cuts straight? I can't remember. And then I'll like hit it in the bit of wood. I'm like, oh, wait, it's not that side.
No,
and
it's other one.
Yeah. And I think that is, just kind of like being fearless, I think, and not having fear of your tools, and not being scared of making mistakes. I think that is by far one of the biggest drawbacks to anyone, and myself included, is if you fear mistakes, and that can come, that can also be as a fear of judgment, or it could just be a fear of something going wrong and being dangerous, or it could be a fear of something just being a waste of time or looking bad. But there is nothing to fear. Everything, there are no mistakes, right? There are no failures. They're all just lessons. So when something doesn't work, you've learned from it. And so then you don't apply that same fault again, ideally. I can't say that. I can't say that. I've always done that. There are some things I'm like cursing myself, like, this is the third time that I've done this. But yeah, I think generally you learn from mistakes, which has been Bluebell. It's basically just learning. I put a screw in that's too big for the screw hole, and I'm like, you knew this, Georgie. But then it's a reminder each time to make your drill bit the right size or slightly bigger. And I think all of these small continuous mistakes are actually all just one big success. And that's the way that I really try and see building, so that when I try and attempt new things, I'm not scared about making mistakes. And as a result, I end up doing it, because I think a lot of the time we get scared of doing things, right? And then we just don't do them. And then that's kind of, then you're like in your 90s and you're like, oh no, I didn't. That's maybe a vast overstatement, but it kind of that's something I get scared of, is that, and I've definitely done it in the past where I haven't done something out of fear of doing it wrong. And that is also another reason that I wanted to create this, ideally try and attempt to create a workshop space for women to build in, because trying to create an environment where it does, like, it's actually enthused to get it wrong, to sit there with a block of wood. This is one of the activities I think could be great. And you just have a bunch of nails in front of you. You've got your hammer, and it's like, right, it is basically your job to hit them in wonky, because that is what's going to happen. So don't worry, when your nail goes in and it doesn't go in straight and it goes flat against its side because it's gone wonky, that's what you're here to do. And until you get that one in straight, just don't worry. There's no mistakes, there's no failures. And I think mainly that's really something that attributes to being able to make great things, because you've kind of pushed through that fear, and you don't, and often things do go wrong. People see Bluebell and they think that it's all just, I often get that comment where people are like, oh, well, it's okay for some people, but for others, I get that quite often where people think it's just happened. But there's been major ultimate cock-ups, one after the other, where things have kind of dropped and cracked and just multiple amounts. So I think that's the lack of fear, I think, is one of the most important fundamentals.
Absolutely brilliant. I can't tell you how I'm totally inspired by all the words you're saying. I can't wait for other people to hear this, and I think they're just going to be running out with a hammer in hand.
That's the world I want to see. Within limits, people, within limits.
Yes, safe hammer use only. Okay, well, I want to know your best day and your worst day.
Ooh. I'm stuck. So the best, I feel like there was this day where, so when I built the dome, which is for people listening, is the dome I keep referring to. The dome is the sleeping area above the cab. And it's, I don't even know if you call it a dome. It's not geometric. It's more like arched, the kind of way that arches work in churches. It's kind of like a vaulted domey thing, but for argument's sake, it's a dome. And the decision to make the dome wasn't planned. I remember I had to make a decision as to how to continue the roof over the cab. I'd already built the roof frame, the main kind of curved structure, and I had to work out how to continue that curve going forward. And I kind of walked out one day. I walked over to Bluebell to start work on it, and I was just staring, and I was like, I'm going to make a dome. That's what's going to happen today. And then I made the dome. I took some few days constructing the dome, and I made it all on the ground because it would have been impossible to make it on the roof, to make it how I was going to do it, which has all these kind of crazy curves. And and so that was making that dome was a really insanely fun project, because I'd kind of come to it in such a light-hearted, silly mood, like, I'm gonna make a dome, why not? And with that actually came a lot of really amazing sort of revelations in terms of joinery and construction. So there's 4 main structural bits that all meet in the middle. And I had to figure out how these 4 pieces of wood coming from different angles would meet at the middle and join. And I actually asked builders. I remember messaging friends who I knew who were architects. And people were sending me back these sketches, and I was like, I don't know, not really happy with that. I don't think, that it might, I wasn't convinced. And it's of course really hard to send people things as an idea. And I was there really still just like not sure how to make this 4-way join. And I remember going to bed one night, really puzzling over it, and waking up. I don't know if you've ever had these, but they are so much fun. Waking up at like 3 a.m, with this like sudden, I know how to do it. And I grabbed my sketchbook and I just drew it in one go. And I'd obviously I'd like not been fully sleeping. I'd been like kind of half dreaming about it. And I drew it out and it was right there. And then the next day I implemented it and it worked. And that was such a glorious moment. And actually on that day, so I built it all on the floor and I was absolutely pooping myself that when we were going to lift it up, it was going to not be exactly square, and it had didn't have much wiggle room to play with. It really had to go on correct. And so I enlisted some help, and we put it up with rope on the ceiling of the roof beam on the barn, and we lowered it with the rope, and it just like slotted in. Ooh. And I got up and I was convinced it was wrong. I was like, there must be, something's not right here. Things don't just happen like this. And I was like inspecting all the corners, but it didn't. It slotted in. And then I had this insane feeling of euphoria, because then I kind of stepped back from the little house and I saw this full shell, this full frame. And I was like, oh my gosh, I did that. I built this thing. It's there. And yeah, and that was an incredible day, like just full of a lot of euphoria. But it's really, that would come to me as my favorite day. However, I actually think my favorite day of building Bluebell was when I built, this is going to sound totally bizarre, but when I built the wheel arches, the covers that go over the wheel arches, because that was something that often when you convert vans, like they come with it, this like plastic or metal coating or frame sort of thing, which goes over the wheels. And those didn't come with mine because I bought the chassis, and they're quite important because obviously as the wheels turn around and they flick up, insane amounts of mud and water and dirt and stones that had to be watertight, really strong, like rot resistant. And so I was suddenly like super out of nowhere. I didn't realize how much of a task that would be. And then when the day came, I was like, blimey, has to be something really well made. And I ended up making the wheel arches, and had this kind of, had this moment of putting them all over the wheels. And I always used recycled materials. I used recycled metal and recycled ancillaries, and then I slotted them on. And it's, it sounds really simple, but that one task of doing something that was quite, involved in a little element of engineering, and it actually, it was I think it was one of the first things that I really, because that was quite early on, I had to consider water ingress, which has been a huge theme in my life. It was one of the first things where I really had to think about elements and movement of like wind and then I kind of created this thing that looked correct, and then it fit on, and it was, I remember that like just having also amazing feelings after building the wheel arches. So it's a really small thing, but I think I always come back to that. Every time someone asks me, I just come back to that day. And I think that maybe is one of those first feelings of thinking, oh, I might actually be all right at this. This might be something that I not only enjoy to do, but I kind of have that brain as such that can do those, that can engineer. So that was at that time as well, I had a lot of self-doubt because a lot of the opinions and the voices I were getting were really, really negative and really like, you can't do this. You just, I had a lot of, I was getting a lot of misogynistic voices at that time, which really, I remember that's like that real particular moment of building the van were enough to really, really dig at me. And then when I did that, it was a bit like, I can do this. It was this wonderful, tiny little wheel arch, which was a small, the start, I think. I do think that those wheel arches were the start of a small light. And then I really, not long after that, I really came out of all that negativity and was able to kind of fly. So I think that was the best. I think that was the best day.
Oh my goodness. Love it. Absolutely love it.
But then the worst day.
I'm almost a bit, I sort of don't want to know. Like, I'm just like, don't crush my happy vibe.
The worst day. Oh yeah. there were a lot of bad days on the roof, I must admit, you know, when the metal was fighting me and it would not, because I couldn't just form it to the shape. It had to get flush enough to sit on the framework so that I could screw it in tight and well. So I had to form it pretty much, you know, exactly. There was no flex in those sheets to kind of bend them to the shape. I had to mold it with the hammer. There were a lot of very hard days on that where I just think for the best part of 6 months, I embodied like a fair amount of things that I needed to hit.
Yeah.
And I did it with the hammer on that roof. So quite often when I look at that roof, you can actually see all of the hammer marks because I actually ended up sanding all of the aluminium after I'd formed it and hit it all of the hammer and it was finished. I sanded it all down so that all of the elements which haven't been touched by a hammer are shiny and silver, or not super shiny because it's old, but you know, this kind of sheen. And then the hammer marks are still the patina of the age, so kind of like a bit dirty, and so you have all these hammer marks everywhere, and each one of those I'm like, you know, I can kind of imagine myself hitting that and getting out some kind of emotion. And of course, because I had to be in that headspace to keep hitting, sometimes it was with good music, you know, and I was just like getting my groove on with my hammer, and other times I was just like, I hate you, roof, and I hate this and I hate that, and I had to really, and actually that's something that sometimes I think, you know, I've always been a bit of criticizer of how people suggest that sometimes building and construction work is aggressive or invites an aggressive environment. And actually there's some elements of that where you do need to tap into something, you know, but that doesn't mean that women can't either, basically. And I think that is something that for the first time I was like, oh yeah, I kind of see how this can be, you know, that you need to tap into something. So I can't really say that it was the worst days because it was kind of therapeutic. But I think, I tell you what, the worst day was when I had a roof leak, and it was where my skylight flashing. I used to have a hole that the solar panel cables were meant to come through. I ended up changing it. But there was a hole where the solar panel cables had to come through, and it just kept leaking, and I could not figure out how on earth it was leaking. The cables were going through a like sealed box. I checked everywhere for cracks in the aluminium. I looked all down the side of the skylight, you know, I just meticulously, day after day, was trying to fix this leak. And then I thought I got it. I found this tiny oxidized hole in right at the top where it would have come down and gone underneath the cable box. And I was so excited. I thought that I got it, and I sealed it all. And the weird thing about this leak was that it didn't always leak, but when it did leak, it was like a torrent of water. It was really bizarre. I had like my dad who worked for the building to come and have a look at it. And he couldn't figure it out. I had lots of, you know, people kind of just stare and look, and we just could not figure it out. And I was getting very, you know, when water, I'm sure many tiny homers or any homers of any sort can know that water really does something to you when it's continuous and it's causing problems. It really, you know, it's one of the downsides of England, of course. It's pretty soggy here, and it can really dig at you. And this thing was like months and months on end. Literally, it was a problem that I could not fix. And I was getting to the stage where I thought, I'm going to have to take this whole piece, like this whole bit of roof off to find, I just could not understand it. And a bit like permaculture, I just had to like do an observation, like a season of observation.
Have it rain in the whole year.
Yeah, and just like wait for it to do its thing, and like, you know, I just had to watch it and like see what conditions it came in worse. And I ended up, it was all when I came to do the solar panel caging, actually. So it wasn't that long ago that I fixed this. I ended up having to change where the solar panel cables were. So I moved the cables back. And when I took off the box itself wasn't faulty. I started thinking that the box itself was, you know, it's just those horrible things made in China, like the kind of plastic things. And the only things you can kind of buy to like house your cable, you know, cable entry glands. And I kind of thought that would be it. But I took it off, and that was absolutely fine. And then I saw that the flashing for the skylight window, I peeled it up slightly to get access to the cables, and it was soaking. It was like absolutely soaking in there. And then I pulled up further and I saw how the actual elements where the roof came in was bone dry. And I was looking at the skylight and I was like, it's you. And it's been you all along. But I tell you what, I've gone forward in time. The worst day was when I thought that I'd fixed it. And I was like, this is incredible. And then the next rain came in and it flooded. And I actually thought it'd been like 7-8 months of trying to fix this leak, just whilst I was doing other things on the van. And after thinking time and time again that you've fixed a problem and it keeps smashing you down, and you feel, it also questions then your ability. So many people, I think one of the things as well is that so many people had been like, I bet that's going to leak, or and there are these particular comments of people who are like, oh, I'll eat my hat, that doesn't leak. And, and then this one little thing was leaking, and it kind of was giving me, it was kind of touching back to those original insecurities I was having at the beginning of the project, when so many people were telling me not to do it, or that I couldn't by myself. And then I felt like they were proving me right in that one tiny little leak. And I remember having quite a bit of a rageful tear about it, and thinking, it's always just going to have to leak, or I'm going to have to cut off a big part of the roof. And that felt ginormous and depressing. And at that time, I just couldn't handle it. Like, I really felt like I couldn't handle it. I was feeling very sensitive about the leak. It was really, and I think this does happen when you're doing a building project, right? That you can become very sensitive. Things can correlate what's happening in your life, and you can feel incredibly vulnerable to your project. When something goes wrong, it can associate very much to what's going on with you, and so it can so it can be quite it's really emotional. I find building very emotional. I'm going to say it. I think that it's a wonderfully emotional and sensitive thing, and that's how we should cherish it, and that's how we should look at it. And so it got to me very, very much. And there was one particular day when, like I said, when I looked in and it was still leaking, and I just thought, oh my gosh, I have failed. And I'm continuously failing because it's not getting better. But then, fortunately, to zip forward in time, and this was such a good lesson for me to know that there's nothing that can't be fixed. There just isn't. There's always going to be a way. And even if I had to take that entire bit of the roof off, I would have done it, and it would have been fixed. And no matter what your problem is, if there's a will, there is a way. And I know that's a classic saying, but it's so true. That if there's a will, there's a way, and there's a way to most building problems, right? Most of them, to some extent. And so and so now that I fixed it, that's a wonderful feeling.
Nice. So you've I was worried about asking your worst day, but you've of course turned it around into positive.
Or I think that hopefully for most of us there's an ability to swing, at least in a building perspective, with things going wrong. Most of the time there's some sort of way, there's some lesson learned, or there's something. Definitely. I mean, there's usually something you can take from it, I believe. I totally understand the leak though. Like 6 years of living on a boat with boat windows are just awful for leaking. And sometimes you think it's a leak, sometimes it's condensation, and it's just like, you work at it, and you've resealed it, and you've taken the whole window out, and you've like done everything you can possibly do. And then it's like, you come back and there's another puddle. Like, Oh yeah, I do. I very much. Yeah, I know that feeling. It's very grueling, isn't it? Very grueling. Water is pretty cruel. You can't underestimate it. That's for sure.
That's perfect. I think that's what we're going to end on, is the cruelness of water.
Rain is pretty. It's pretty hardcore. And drizzle. It's drizzle. I tell you what, it's that sneaky drizzle, which is like pretending not to be rain.
Yeah.
But it's worse than rain, because it quite often it can create like a pressure, and I was finding that my leak was like sucking in water on drizzly days, and then on like heavy days of rain, it was like it wasn't showing up. It was totally bizarre. But yeah, that I think, and also maybe one last thing to end on in that respect is that your materials and the world of building there's always more mysteries. There are always more curiosities, and it will nothing that you ever make will stop surprising you.
Oh my goodness.
So thank you so much to Georgie. That was so good. I really am feeling inspired and excited, and it's really kind of reset my brain on a few of my building things. I feel like there's so much similarities that we have, and thoughts and philosophies, but I really think that the way she has been building is it's beyond what I could dedicate myself to do, I think. Like a truly wonderful and unique project. So thank you, Georgie. Do check out her Instagram and the websites from the show notes. There is a few links to Right to Rome and Kill the Bill and In Her Hands, West Eton College. I'll chuck those all in the show notes. What else? If you have enjoyed the show and want to contribute to the making of the show financially, then head to patreon.com/building sustainability. It is all self-financed, so it does genuinely make the show get made. And thank you to everyone who is already supporting. You absolutely rock. Do get in contact if you've got thoughts or questions or comments or concerns. There's a contact form on the website, buildingsustainabilitypodcast.com. I have been getting lots of emails from people just letting me know what they're enjoying, and that's really great. I really thoroughly appreciate having kind of humans contact me, because talking to the microphone it's a little one-sided. Yeah, and if you do have thoughts on how we can create a community around the podcast to sort of aid discussion and maybe connect up some of the listeners who might have similar ideas and interests, then do let me know. And for now, if you've got thoughts on any of the episodes, stick them on the podcast website, buildingsustainability.com. Every episode has a chat box at the bottom. I think that's everything. I've tried to be really quick because these conversations were long, but that probably means I've forgotten something. Oh yes, share this episode wherever you can. Get more people listening, and tell your friends and your mum and anyone else who you come into contact with that they should listen to Building Sustainability Podcast. Nice. Thanks everybody. Until next time. Bye bye.